and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 4 of the Irish Accent Podcast. I hope you're all doing well and that you're having a great week so far. I am currently very hot as I sit here and record this episode. I know I spoke all about summer and hot weather in last week's episode, but we're having another very hot week here, and my apartment gets very hot in the summer. My apartment is quite old and I think it's quite badly insulated, so in the winter it gets freezing cold inside, and then in the summer it gets boiling hot, which is not very ideal. And I had to turn off the fan here to record the episode, so hopefully I can make it through the recording. Anyway, in other news, I've actually recently started learning a new language. So the new language that I'm learning is Dutch, and I'm a complete beginner. I went to the bookstore at the weekend and I bought a self-study book because I'm hoping to self-study the first couple of levels. So ideally, I will self-study levels A0 to A1 and then A1 to A2, and then maybe register for classes for B1 level. The reason for that is apparently, as an English speaker, Dutch is one of the easier languages to learn. Now, I'm not sure how true that is, but I'm going to give self-studying a go, and then if I need to a little bit later, I will register for proper classes. But this isn't my first time learning a new language, and from my experiences with studying other languages, I've learned many different tips and tricks, and also sort of figured out how I learn a language best and what works best for me. Because there are so many different ways to learn a language, and it goes without saying, but everyone's learning style is so different. It really suits some people just to sit down with a book and pen and study and learn the grammar rules, learn off lists of vocabulary, that more traditional way of learning a language. Some people say that complete immersion is the only way that works for them. So actually going to the country, speaking to native speakers, not even opening a book, but just learning from listening and talking to people. So everybody is different, and I'm still figuring out the best way to learn a language for myself. But today I wanted to share my current top 3 tips for learning a language. So these are things that have helped me a lot when I learn other languages. So hopefully they can help you too. So let's get started with tip number 1. So tip number 1 is vocabulary, or more specifically, the software Anki. So it may sound very obvious, but learning as many new words as you can is so important. If you don't focus on vocabulary at all, it doesn't matter how much grammar you've learned. If you don't have vocabulary, you can't actually use those grammar patterns that you've learned to create new and different sentences. And especially as you become more comfortable with the language, you really want to start expressing yourself and talking about different topics. It's very boring if you have to keep repeating the same topics over and over, like your name, like where you come from, your job, your family. It's only natural that you want to start conversing about different topics, and you really can't do that if you don't have the vocabulary to discuss those topics. So of course, everyone is different when it comes to learning vocabulary, but what I have found works really well for me is an app called Anki. I used to just write all my new words in a notebook, and I would cover them up and try to learn them off and test myself, but I just found I never really became confident with using the words. I felt like they weren't really properly in my brain. I felt like I was always forgetting the vocabulary. But then I discovered this software called Anki. So it's basically a free software that you can download onto your laptop. Now, apparently there is also a app version that you can get on your phone, but I just downloaded the software onto my laptop. It was very, very easy to do. And you basically build different flashcard decks. Some people actually have already built flashcards. So if you're learning English, I'm sure you can Google Anki decks in English, and you can probably download different vocabulary decks that other people have already made. But for me, I've actually just built all of my decks myself. And just like with a regular flashcard, you put a word on one side and then you put the meaning or the translation on the other side. And how Anki works is it uses a method called space repetition. So if Anki shows you a flashcard and you remember the word really, really easily with no issues, you can choose to not see that word again for maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even 3 months if you feel that you've really learned it. However, if it shows you a word and you're not very confident with it and you feel like you would like to revise that word again soon, you can choose to see the word again tomorrow or maybe after a week. There are so many different ways of using the decks and building the decks, and apparently people actually use Anki for many different things, not just languages. I've heard it's very popular for medical students. But even within language learning, people have different ways that they like to use it. Some people like to put full sentences on the flashcards. Some people just prefer to have the words on there. But for me, when I started using Anki, I was putting the word in my target language. So for example, I was putting the Dutch word on the front and then the translation in English on the back. So when I would start, Anki would show me the word in Dutch. But I was actually finding that too easy, because for me, when I see the word, I can recognize it, I can recall the meaning. But it's very different if I see the word in English and I have to try and remember what that word means in Dutch. It's much more challenging for me. So now I always put the word in English or my own language on the front. So that's the word I see with the translation on the back to test if I can remember what the translation is. So I've been using Anki for about a year now for some languages that I'm learning, and I found it's so helpful for building up my vocabulary. In the past year, my vocabulary has improved so much compared to when I was studying with just a notebook or with a book. Now, it is challenging because you have to study every day or the words will build up. So the next time you log on to the software, there could be hundreds of words waiting to be revised. So it's very important that you revise daily, check the words, and then it's much more manageable. So I'd be very curious if any of you already use Anki, or if you try it, how you find it. Please do let me know. My second tip is listen, listen, listen. So basically, I recommend listening to your target language as much as possible. When I start learning a language, I will find maybe 5 or 6 different podcasts that are at my level, that I find interesting, and I will play them as much as possible. Whenever I'm just at home or doing some jobs around the house, I'll always put on a podcast in my target language. And so often I don't understand much of what's being said. I mean, sometimes I don't even understand 50 or 60% of what is being said. But it's amazing. As the months pass by, you will slowly start to realize that you can understand more and more as your listening skills improve. I found it so helpful for becoming comfortable with the pronunciation, the flow, the sound of a language. My brain just becomes much more accustomed to how the language sounds. I recommend having a couple of different podcasts with some male, some female speakers, maybe people of different ages, just so you can become comfortable with how different people sound speaking that language, because there's no point only being able to understand one person. Of course, you need to be able to understand how many different people speak the language. I mainly listen to podcasts that are at my level and that I can kind of understand or follow, but I'll actually often also put on much more advanced podcasts. And when I listen to them, I often don't understand even 90% of the podcast, 95% of the podcast. But again, it's just really helpful to become comfortable with how a natural conversation sounds, with how the language sounds being spoken at the correct speed. So again, this is actually something I've started implementing maybe over the past year, and I've found my listening skills have improved so much just from simply putting on podcasts in my background. And honestly, sometimes I'm not even listening very carefully to the podcasts. Sometimes I'm thinking about different things or I'm busy with different chores. But I think just having them on in the background has made my ear much more comfortable with the sounds of the language. So I can definitely recommend play your podcasts as much as possible, and I really think you'll find your listening skills will go up. And then my final tip, or tip number 3, is shadowing. So shadowing means listening to a sentence in your target language and then repeating it, exactly like the speaker said. So you copy the pronunciation, the rhythm, the tone. You can do this with YouTube videos or TV shows. So the most important thing, of course, is to choose something that you enjoy. So if you love sports, find a video of someone talking about sports. Or if you love fashion, maybe you could find a good fashion vlogger's video. The content really doesn't matter. It's just important that you actually enjoy what you're watching, because then you'll be much more likely to practice. So here's how I do it. I will find a video about something that I'm interested in. I will listen to one sentence. I'll pause the video. I will try to repeat the sentence exactly like the speaker. Then maybe I will go back and play again. And this time I will try to speak with the speaker to try to match their tone, their flow. And then I might go back, listen one more time, repeat it again. So it's a very slow process. And sometimes I can get impatient. And especially if I'm enjoying the video, I just want to skip ahead and watch the whole video. But I have found this really helpful for improving my confidence with speaking, because I'm actually mimicking a native speaker. I'm following their pronunciation and their rhythm, and I'm actually speaking out loud, because especially if you're self-studying, it can be very hard to practice speaking. It's very easy, of course, to learn your vocabulary and your grammar. So unless you want to pay for classes or you know a native speaker that you can practice with, it can be really very difficult to practice your speaking. And of course, that's the end goal with learning a language. You want to be able to speak, and you want to be able to speak confidently. So I found shadowing is so important for just building your confidence with speaking. And it's very helpful to know that you're speaking correctly, because you're following how a native speaker talks. So they were my 3 main tips for learning a language, and they're what I have found personally very helpful over the past year or 2 when I've been learning languages. And I'm definitely going to implement these 3 tips going forward with my new challenge, learning Dutch. So I will let you know how I go. If you have any tips or anything that you find very helpful for when you're learning a language, please do let me know in the comments. I'm always open to new ways of learning a language. So please do leave a comment wherever you're listening to or watching the podcast. And thank you so much, as always, for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll speak to you again next week. Bye bye.